Key West sits about 150 miles south of Miami at the southernmost tip of the Florida Keys. The Atlantic Ocean lies to the south of the island, while the Gulf of Mexico lies to the north. As a result, the diving in Key West is totally different from any place else in Florida. The accessible Atlantic Reef Line runs from American Shoals west to Cosgrove Light. The Gulf does not have a reef line as such, and the diving is best on the numerous shoals, coral patches, and natural wrecks. The Marquesas Keys are located about 30 miles due west of Key West, and they provide a unique diving experience in themselves. Key West offers the best sport fishing in the United States, and this abundance of game fish and lobster provides a world of adventure for divers of all ages and skills. From reefs to wrecks, this is the underwater world of Key West, Florida.
Called the Grand Canyon. It's two very, very large coral heads that come up from about 30 feet to almost 15 feet of the surface. There's some real pretty fish here, a lot of marine life, and it's a real diversified area, okay? You swim through it and you look up and it's like being in the walls of the Grand Canyon. That's where we gave it its name from, okay? But take a look around, spend your time working out in front of the boat here, and then you can work back into the reef where it shallows up back this way into the coral fingers, the spur and groove formations. You don't want to get up into the white water today, okay? If you feel the surge, you're getting too shallow and you need to move back out. So you'll be moving around these coral heads, then into the reef, then back out, back into the reef, in and out like that, okay? You stay together with your buddy. Make sure that anytime your head breaks the surface, divers, we need an okay signal like this or like this. All right? If you get lost or disoriented, make sure you come up and check. The lighthouse is 109 feet high. We're the big white boat out here. All right? If you don't know where you're at. If you get separated from your buddy, come up, give us an okay signal, drop your arms to the side. It means I'm okay, but my buddy took off. We know that you wouldn't take off, but we know your buddy will take off, okay?
In addition to the natural reef line, Key West's artificial reef program has sunk several ships along the Atlantic side. Perhaps the most popular of the diving wrecks is the Cayman Salvager, which has been down for about 5 years. It is 180 feet long and sits upright in 90 feet of water due south of Key West. It has developed a solid coral base and its own resident fish population. In the winter, the wrecks attract schools of bait fish which bring in game fish such as grouper, amberjack, and cobia, along with the more common snapper and yellowtail. Several divers on the Cayman Salvager have been pleasantly surprised to look up and see a sailfish swimming by. The most recent addition to the artificial wreck fleet is an 80-foot steel-hulled shrimper called Joe's Tug, which lies a few miles east of the Cayman Salvager in about 60 feet of water. This wreck is positioned on top of the 5-fathom bar, so the reef area around the tug is very interesting in itself. When wrecks such as these are sunk, they create pressure waves in the water column, so fish are immediately attracted to the vessel and generally stick around out of curiosity. The algae growth begins the food chain, and within 6 months, a marine community has developed that did not exist before. If you are lucky, you're likely to see almost anything that swims around the wrecks on the Atlantic side of Key West. If you're used to diving the Atlantic, you'll be surprised to find that the Gulf of Mexico is totally different. The visibility in the Gulf is generally not as good as the Atlantic, but the temperature is about the same, rarely dipping below 70 degrees even in the winter. The nearest and most popular of the Gulf wrecks is known as Alexander's Wreck, and it lies in 30 feet of water a few miles northwest of Cottrell Key. This wreck has been down for almost 30 years, and the coral growth is impressive. It is home to literally thousands of tropical fish, nudibranchs, oysters, crabs, tube worms, and other invertebrates, and it makes a perfect setting for macro photography. It is also not unusual to see large rays, grouper, snook, amberjack, cobia, barracuda, and occasionally jewfish cruising in and out of the area of the wreck. In the summer, there are huge schools of glass minnows that take up residence. When the minnows are in, the game fish won't be far away. The ship itself broke in half when it was sunk, and the stern section lies about 150 yards north of the bow. The shallow depth gives you plenty of bottom time on each section and makes for a very pleasant day's dive. There are many large coral patches just north of Key West in anywhere from 10 to 30 feet of water. In the Gulf, You lose the branching corals and pick up all the encrusting corals, so any formation of rocks will eventually form a large coral patch reef or shoal, which, like a wreck, attracts its own supply of marine life. You'll find plenty of tropical fish, but the main resident is the Florida lobster. The waters around Key West are literally famous for the amount of lobster they contain, and these Gulf rock piles are very, very productive. Once you find a good patch, it's not unusual to take your limit in a few hours without even moving the boat. The best way to catch a lobster is with a net and a tickle stick. Lobsters only move backwards, so the plan is to place the net behind him, tap him on the nose with the stick, and watch him scoot backwards into the net. Once you get him, be sure to measure him in the water and make sure he's legal. If you have shorts on your boat, the Marine Patrol can make your trip very expensive. Some of the best lobstering is done in water that is less than 10 feet deep. You can usually spot their feelers sticking out from under a ledge or small reef area. We can't guarantee that you'll get your entire limit in one shot, but anything's possible in Key West. If you have access to a small, fast boat, you can open up a whole new dimension to diving Key West. The larger boats have a limited range, but many of the dive shops have six-pack boats in the 25-foot range, which are powered by reliable outboards and give them a cruising speed of over 25 miles an hour. These boats can make the 30-mile run to the Marquesas in less than an hour. There are probably 100 wrecks in the Key West area. Sometimes these small, fast boats cover over 100 miles in a day, which will allow you to dive 3 or 4 wrecks that are literally untouched by divers. Several of the fishing guides are willing to convert to a custom dive trip, but the arrangements have to be made in advance through your dive shop. The advantage of a custom charter is that the day can be spent on spearfishing, lobstering, photography, or even just snorkeling the shallow wrecks and patch reefs. The wrecks around the Marquesas are generally in less than 20 feet of water and just teem with fish. One in particular has a huge school of lookdowns that are fascinating to watch. It is not unusual to see grouper, jewfish, cobia, and even snook on these wrecks, along with plenty of lobster. advanced divers may want to try a trip into the North Gulf, which is truly virgin territory. The visibility is generally 30 feet or less, but there are several shoals and towers that are very interesting, rarely visited by divers, and hold a wide variety of marine life. The most unusual diving in Key West can only be done in the small boats in the spring and summer months. It requires leaving the dock about 7:30 in the morning and running some 30 miles north to the area where the shrimp boats work their nets. The shrimpers drag their nets at night and clean their catch at daylight. When they're finished, they dump the trash fish and crabs back into the water, usually into the waiting mouths of several friendly dolphin. The dolphin have learned that the shrimp boats are floating restaurants, and they'll come right up to your boat looking for a handout. They are the most fascinating creatures in the sea, and it's an experience you'll never forget. If you find the dolphin, it's going to be hard to leave them. But the second half of the trip will take you to a wreck like no other you have ever seen. There are several World War II ships and several sunken shrimp boats that are packed with unusual tropicals and game fish such as permit, cobia, African pompano, and unfortunately sharks in numbers that are rarely experienced by divers. Most of the wooden hulls of the shrimp boats have been eaten away by the sea over the years, and what remains are the metal booms, tanks, and rigging, along with the nylon ropes and nets. The debris lies on a clear sand bottom and quickly turns into an apartment house for marine life. It's amazing, but schools of amberjack and cobia return to the same wrecks every winter, year after year. Eventually, each wreck will become known by the guides for a predominance of a certain species of fish. The wreckage usually covers a small area, and the depth is usually less than 80 feet. If you limit your bottom time slightly, it's possible to dive several of these wrecks in one day's trip. These wrecks can only be found by Loran Sea coordinates, and they're hardly guarded secrets by the guides. But once you get there, the highlight is always the resident turtle, who sooner or later will come by to check you out and serve as a tour guide.
Most people will tell you if you're coming to Key West for the diving, there's really no reason not to just stop at Key Largo and dive there. That the real reason to come to Key West is for the nightlife, and diving is just something to do while you're here. They do have nice reefs, and they have some nice wrecks near Key West. I tell you, Pat Ford showed me some of the most unusual diving I've ever done in Florida, in the wrecks far off into the Gulf of Mexico. It's really something else to go down on one of these things and have a whole school of amberjack chasing you like a bunch of little puppies, swimming after you so close that they bump into you when you stop swimming. There's also friendly dolphins out there that hang around by the shrimp boats that'll take fish right out of your hand. Big turtles, schools of glass minnows, unusual fish like African pompano and lookdowns that you won't see in most other places. There's quite a bit of unusual diving here. It takes a little bit of effort to get that special stuff. Now, if you're one of the late night partiers, you might just want a nice shallow reef in 30 feet, and they have that here too. That's where most of the dive boats go.
This program was produced and licensed by International Video Projects Incorporated of Lakeland, Florida. For additional information about this program and other programs we offer, please write International Video Projects, 6700 South Florida Avenue, Suite 28, Lakeland, Florida, 33813-3312, or call toll-free 800-852-0662. Our collection of programs may also be reviewed on our website, www.videoprojects.tv. Thanks for watching.